intro.
So welcome everyone to this live stream with Cult of Paint. We've been known for our tutorials so far, but tonight we're going to be doing one of our first interviews. We're hoping to bring a bunch of cool stuff other than tutorials to the channel, all to do with painting. And tonight is a really cool one because we have with us Mr. David Colwell. Welcome, Dave. How are you doing?
G'day guys, doing pretty good. Nice and early in the morning here in Australia.
Yeah,
but
thanks
I'm
for
a morning
getting up,
person
mate.
these days, so that's good.
So it's early for Dave, late for us. And the reason we've got Dave on, not that we needed an excuse, is because the Kickstarter we're running right now, Dave was actually responsible for 2 of the amazing box arts.
Okay, just dial it back 2 seconds, Andy. We've got some crazy sound stuff going on with your mic, so rather than dive into all of this, let's get all that sorted before we carry on.
Not worried.
Just say a few things, Andy. Just, I don't know, tell us about your day, and let's see if the echo's gone.
How's that now? Echo gone?
We got to wait like 10 seconds, haven't we? And then
No, I can't hear an echo.
Nah, it's been all good my end as well, mate, but the chat's all like, what the hell is going on? What's wrong with you people?
Really?
No, they're all right. They're not being horrible. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Crack on.
Okay. Excellent.
Anyway, apologies for that sound issues. But tonight we've got Dave on, and primarily we're going to be talking about how we went about doing our fantastic box arts for the Deorgard Kickstarter, and we'll be answering a bunch of questions from you guys as well. So I think we can just dive straight into the meat and grit of it. And Dave, just tell us a little bit about, how you found painting these 2 models, and we'll probably just stem from there and get onto some specifics.
Well, I seem to always find everything challenging. So it's always a challenge, and there were certain things that I always try and challenge myself to do, or like have a set thing that I want to try and learn with each new model that I do. And both of these are no exception to that. I had 2 very different ideas for both of them, and 2 themes that I wanted to follow through. So they were excellent choices for both of those ideas, I think. And there was a tuning along the way for both of them. But yeah, they were great fun. I loved, as you know, when we were talking about it, the face on the Huntress.
Yeah.
That face, so expressive, so much, I don't know, so much incredible detail in the sculpt and around the lips and the teeth. Just amazing. And then the Woodsman, I liked that model mostly from the first time I saw it. The ideas seemed to fall into place just as soon as I saw it. I love when that happens. When you see something like the idea comes up and you're like, wicked.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of questions from that, actually. The first one, I think you kind of mentioned you had some ideas before. So with both these projects, were there actually things you wanted to try anyway on a model, and you just picked these ones for it? Or was it a combination of, when you saw the actual models, having some ideas?
It's actually a bit of both. So I'm stalling because I'm trying to decide which one to go into first. I think we'll go the Huntress.
Yeah, come on. I think I'd love it if we could, Dave, sort of key in on the Woodsman to begin with. And what I was hoping for would maybe we can have another chat about the Huntress, but also just talk about bust painting in general. So if that's cool with you.
Yeah, no worries. I just was trying to decide just then. But yeah, so the Woodsman idea, like I've actually had the opportunity this year to paint a few nature-based models with greens and yellows, and I noticed at the end of last year when I was looking at a lot of my recent paint, there was a very large lack of green. I hadn't been painting green much at all. So one of my ideas to try and challenge myself this year was to use more green and try and figure out how to make that work. And so I've done a couple of models trying to explore green skin in a different way than like the way it is with orcs, in a more natural looking way. And so I've gone from like a green and olive and then onto a more of a bit more yellowy gold. And then for the woodsman, I decided to dive all the way in on the yellow to green. And I had no idea if this guy was going to work. And I wanted to use the whole rainbow. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but when you look at the whole model from his face, the color wheel down his arms, it goes from yellow to green to blue, and then down his chest it goes from yellow to orange to red to purple, and then so that's got the whole color wheel in it there. It's pretty subtle, and I was taking a big risk. Like I told you a few times, I'm going to do a few risky ideas on these guys. I had no idea if like having the whole rainbow was going to work, but I think it has. Even though it's subtle with the purples and the red and orange in his legs, but it's still in those tones. So that was the idea for this guy.
I think it's the amounts that make it work. So you do have some of those colors like purple, which could be too much against that yellow. But in the controlled amounts you've used, it absolutely works, because when you look at it, it's a very coherent overall palette. But then you dive in and you can find all of these other colors. And actually, kind of what I like the most is how the torso, which is obviously what should be center stage because it's got the face in it and everything, is sandwiched by those darker, more browny colors. So you've literally got those either side of it, and it's all very natural. But when you look, there's all these colors. So really, really cool, really fun to look at.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there's an element of luck involved when you're taking a big risk like this, because when you start a model and you start painting, you really have no idea how it's going to turn out, and you just paint. You're painting millimeter at a time, and you have this envisaged idea, and sometimes it comes out and sometimes it doesn't. And usually, like you can get it looking to a good point, but then sometimes things just seem to fall together without having to adjust too much. And in the case of his skin, that seemed to happen with this. I didn't have to do too much adjustment as I went. It was just falling into place. There was a bit of adjustment in his legs later on, whereas compared with the Huntress, there was a fair bit of adjustment with that one, which is something we can discuss later. But that's something I'm not sure I've heard discussed that much, is just the way that like ideas seem to flow through as you're painting, and like whether the idea is working or not and how to adjust. I'm not much of an adjustment kind of painter. I like to plan everything beforehand and have my ideas pretty much decided before I start, whereas there are some painters who are really really good at naturally just flowing with whatever feels right at the time.
So do you find everything is really pre-planned, and you'll even think of specific paints you use, or is it just the palette overall?
Yeah, generally just a palette overall. And then once I've come up with the idea of how I want it to look, then I'll choose the colors. And then you can see the palette on the screen at the moment, which is kind of crazy. I am a bit of a chaotic painter when it comes to picking which color to use. It's just basically the whole rainbow on there, a lot of different versions of different colors from different brands, and I'll just pick different bits from each of them depending on what I want at the particular time. It's hard to even really describe what I choose, but it just seems to be, okay, I need this or I need that, so I'll use that. And most of the time the palette grows over the model, and I like not to replace my palette over the course of a model, because when I'm blending, the colors get mixed on the palette, and I can never seem to match exactly the right tone or value.
I feel you there.
So
that's really interesting. Just seeing how chaotic your palette is in comparison to your figures, which are really clean, but I really like to see it. And I find the approach of keeping the same palette for a figure really interesting, because I find myself I can never keep one palette. I've always run out of room and it gets too messy, and I always have to start fresh. But I do think it's a really important point that sometimes there's those tones you create, and if you can't go back and find them, it can be frustrating, because that happened to me this weekend. So I was like, I should keep my palettes for longer. So it's a really good phrase.
I used to replace it a lot more often, but recently I've had a couple of experiences where I just couldn't get a tone right. I don't know if you remember the cozy model I painted.
Oh yeah.
There was some color in the shadow. I threw out the palette and I had to repaint a whole area because I just tried to do a little bit of work on there. The color was totally off, and so I had to redo a whole bunch of it there. So since then, I've been trying to just keep the palette for as long as I can. I'm actually considering getting one of those large size Masterson palettes. They're 12 by 16 inches. Big ones. Yeah. Because I could do with more room. As you can see there, I've used the whole thing, and by the time at the end, I was like, scratching for little bits of space to try and just do a little bit here, a little bit there, and
someone in the chat, Chris, has described your palette as looking like a Care Bear massacre. So,
well, that's about right. Because and there's not really an order to anything. I mean, if you look at it, I suppose it goes blue to green to yellow to orange across the palette, but that wasn't intentional really. I just put the colors down, and now that I look at it, it does sort of flow that way. But there's a lot of areas on the model where I've just taken bits and pieces from all of the different colors. So
it's wiki, mate. I think one thing I'd like to touch on, Dave, if we could, just going back ever so slightly. You were saying how you took a slightly different approach to what you would normally do with your models, as I say, with less planning and more just going at it, sort of going with the flow on the model. Was there anything particular about the model that encouraged you to do this, or was this very much something you'd been wanting to do and then you were like, yeah, let's do it on this one?
Hey, again, it's a bit of both. This model really when I saw it, I just thought, oh man, like I've painted this sort of theme already, but I want to go wild with it and see if I can make it work with like really saturated yellow. And I don't think that there's many models that kind of really saturated yellow skin could work on. And all the other times that I've done it, I've done green in the shadows, but I actually painted him red underneath as a base coat because I wanted to really, when you're going into green from yellow, you're going in the opposite direction as in the color wheel. So when you've got the red underneath, you're starting from a warm base, whereas with the olive or the green shadows, which is kind of like outside the scope of how he fits into the scene, because he should have green shadows because he's in nature and stuff. So in the end, I've only really kept the red and orange shadows around his face and chest, but I think that's an effective way to draw the attention of the viewer to the chest area, because it's kind of outside of the rest of the palette. Like the rest of the model has got sort of colder shadows, but just around his face and the focus area, you've got a warmer shadows to see, and trying to think a lot more about doing stuff like that lately. I've had some really great teachers along the way that have explained these kind of ideas to me. And I think since I did the class with Craft World earlier this year, that it's really sunk in some ideas that have been given to me over the years by Mark and Kaha and Roman Gruber. And it's just really interesting to me to find that, like, I keep coming back to the things that they taught me that I didn't grasp at the time, and they seem to be sinking in more now. And I'm still working on trying to figure it all out, which is really cool, because I still feel like a noob.
Yeah, I agree with that, because sometimes, you know, I've had lessons with people in the past and you can understand what they're saying at the time, but then you can actually utilize what they've said more even years down the line.
That's exactly it.
Like I had a class with Alfonso Banchi, I think nearly 6 years ago, and there'll be little sentences which I didn't use immediately after, maybe some snippet of color theory or an idea, and I just haven't needed to use it or been able to. And then years on, I might be doing some other project and thinking about a more interesting light situation that comes into it. So I totally get what you mean there. And I think that's one of the cool things about, you know, sharing painting and doing painting classes in general, is because you can just plant these little seeds and they can come up whenever in your painting. Even with people that maybe don't paint many display models or something, but they do a class which is aimed towards that. And then eventually they do get into it and they can use those skills. So yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. And it's really cool hearing you describe about keeping the red and all the strength around the face, because he does have this kind of glowing aura around those kind of facial features. And it's really interesting to hear exactly why it is like that. And I think that can help people learn just from seeing that. And just from seeing this early whip we've got on the screen, that really red, you know, strong reddish base coat is maybe not what people would expect, but it's all those kind of undertones that can give that end result. So it's actually, it's really great just to look at the whips, and then to hear you explain it as well, I think is really cool.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to me to hear you say basically what I was thinking about learning from classes. Like, that's exactly what I meant. So it's cool that we've had the same sort of experience from different teachers. And yeah, I will always take the opportunity to learn from anyone who I can. So I can't wait to get more chances when traveling is allowed again, to learn from other painters. I'm really looking forward to getting some more classes in, because I haven't had any this year, and that's a shame.
Yeah, we don't need to tell us about that, because
yeah, you've just gone into lockdown and we've just
what happened. Out. We've ended up on YouTube, mate.
Yeah, look at us. Well, I mean, I forget that our primary focus of Cult Paint was physical classes, and it feels a way off doing Kickstarters and stuff. But it's been great to branch out, and actually it's been amazing to do this Kickstarter, to get to work with people like yourself, and I think it's been one of the most joyous things for me and Henry is to get box arts from other people, because I liked doing them myself before and it was good, but actually it's been great to share that with other people, especially from my point of view. You know, I've had loads of ideas for the Woodsman and none of them were yellow. So that was just so super cool. That was a great experience. You know, I thought of red, I thought of green, blue, and never yellow. So just down to the simple thing of never would have thought of that is amazing for me.
And I think the best models are the ones that have such potential for variety from different painters having different ideas. Yeah. And this is one of the cases where he can really be any color, any style, any way, and that's what I think makes the best models. And so he stands out in that way to me because of that.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the. It's something from a few different angles that we'd considered from very, very early on. But even little things like only having black and white artwork, so that you're never pushing people, whether it's overtly or subliminally or whatever, to go a certain way with it. And because it's very exciting to obviously see what you and the other guys that have done the box art produced, and we've got our second wave, as it were, of box art coming out from this week. So we're going to get to see a few variations on all of the models before the campaign's over. But the really exciting thing again will be when we ship next year.
Seeing everyone else painting it.
Yeah, exactly. Seeing what comes out, and that's not just from an ego stroking point of view of going, oh yeah, so and so's bought this model, our model, great. It's pure excitement of we obviously think these models are cool. Now we get to see them how other people get them in their hands and interpret them. And I do feel like the Woodsman, considering the two versions that we've seen so far have been bright purple
and yellow
and every color of the rainbow. It's going to be quite shocking to see one with just
skin color,
just slightly more what's the word, like a less kaleidoscopic skin tone.
Yeah, and that's cool. I think one of my favorite parts of this mini painting community and mini painting in general is the fact that we're all sharing our arts and sharing the different ideas on the same sort of canvas. Like it's a 3D canvas that we paint different things on. To me, it's a really it's a really modern form of art because of that. Because it's not about individual. Well, it is about individual expression, but it's about sharing individual expression with a lot of people in different ways, and I really love that part about it.
Definitely. I think you see it in these slightly larger scale models as well, don't you? There's simply because there's a little bit more room to explore, right, and express.
I think that's the thing about sorry Dave, I think that's the interesting thing about painting miniatures in general. Like Dave was saying, in other art, then people just do what they want on the canvas, right? We're all actually painting the same thing, so it's more comparable, and you can actually maybe form like more of a bond on that. Because when I paint the Woodsman, it's the same one that Dave did, and so you can actually talk about it more because you're painting the same thing, and you can be as creative as you want, but you're on that same sculpture, and that is really different experience to 2D art because you've got nothing there to go by. So I think that's one of the interesting things about miniature painting and the community in it, because you're almost sharing it more, doing the same things, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So considering, let's just go on a slight tangent because it's fun and we can. I think it's fair to say we all like some Games Workshop models. We all like some of that background to go and paint within. Dave, obviously you had that very popular alternate take on some Heresy Legions, didn't you? With those things. So and that's sort of where I want to bring this in. It's obviously, I would assume, more challenging to rock the boat or bring your own take or expression, or however you want to word it, on something that has a very established look, right, or color scheme, or whatever you want to call it. So I think it's something we've noticed when we've done classes on non-GW, particularly larger scale models, whether that's been our own busts, our own figures, or other companies' figures as well. When someone comes on the Orc Bust painting class, there's no list of paints that they have to bring. It's you can go and paint this Orc Bust whatever color you want. Whereas someone's coming on a marine tank painting class, there's very much okay, well, you're painting the Blood Angels, so you're going to want red, and you're painting the Imperial Fists, so you're going to want yellow, and so on and so forth. How do you combine those two things? Like with that heresy project you did, there was obviously what's the word I'm looking for? They were always going to challenge people, right? Straight away.
Yeah.
Primaris, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, I can't deny that there's a lot of people who call that heresy, and in the truest sense, like they think it shouldn't be done. I've posted those guys in some groups on Facebook that are Horus Heresy only groups, and had my post deleted. So it's like I honestly I don't mind, and I've come up with my own headcanon to create them, make them fit within the modern law. So they're not actually heresy Marines; they're just heresy Legion Marines, but actually true Primaris loyalists, created by Belisarius Call, behind Gilliman's back without his permission, and released into the wild to prove to him that there is no reason to fear the chaos tainted gene seed. Nice. And then there have been a few that I've sort of considered going over the edge already anyway, like the word bearer. How can there ever be a loyalist word bearer? And so there's some others like that as well. Like I've just been almost finishing up a Fallen, and Fallen Primaris. I don't know. Is it just a Dark Angel wearing Fallen gear, or is it the other way around? Or I like to have that up in the air for the viewer to decide how it fits with how they see things, and sort of swerving directions in terms of like going away from law to like painting and how to choose and be creative within those set color schemes. I think it's something that I always try and think about is like, you've got your set color schemes for those legions. So if you want to paint red and you want to practice painting red, then you can choose a Blood Angel or a Word Bearer or a Thousand Sun, and they are all red armored dudes. But you can get so much. I'm finding these days that there's so much room for variation within just the color red. And you can choose to put like a dude who's in red armor in a totally different lighting circumstance. So maybe it's really dark and blue light in red. So you're no longer going to be painting a red Marine anymore. He's going to go into the magentas or even the purples, depending how that light interacts. And so if you start thinking about the ambience and the light that surrounds them, you can get those specific and set colors that are, there's only really that way to paint them if you're going to paint those guys, because it's part of the lore, and you can't do a green Blood Angel, although you can if you choose a successor chapter, but you know what I mean? But if you choose, like, say the Blood Angels are in a Necron tomb and there's a really green light in there, so you can paint a green Blood Angel just by doing that.
Nice.
100%.
That's this version. So I guess following from that thought, when you're painting something, and I suppose this is what it has a crossover or similarity for authors as well. When you're painting within a known background, a known setting, and you have these guidelines or whatever you want to call them. You have starting points, restraints, whatever.
Yep.
How then do you take a model that doesn't really have any of that? I mean, we have spoken a little bit about the background for Deorgard, but it is deliberately nascent. It is deliberately meant to be, is this a mythology of our world, as it were? There's not a ton of information there. How do you then go from having really quite strict parameters almost when it comes to how you can approach it, in spite of how subversive you might manage to be, to going, which I think is awesome. But how do you then go to the complete other end, where you're sort of just said, here you go wild? Because I think sometimes that that sandpit approach, whether it's video games or whatever, can sometimes backfire, and people can find it a little bit overwhelming not having any point of reference. So how does that affect you? How do you approach that?
That is a big part of. I'm getting an echo. Is that? I think it's fixed. There's the reason why I like to go back and forth between them. So like between every few made up display character pieces, I like to go back to the Games Workshop stuff and do something that's got sort of like some set colors that I expect, just to keep my mind flip-flopping. I like to try and keep challenging myself every time, but there's always for me at least, there always seems to be a way to associate something that I see in a model with some sort of lore or story out there, whether it be different types of fantasy or different types of sci-fi, and you can take elements from each of those, and maybe that happens subconsciously. I don't know, because I don't specifically think, okay, I'm painting this to be a cyberpunk 2077 character from the game, although I'm painting a character at the moment who I'm sort of thinking of like that. It really depends on the model, and I spend a lot of time on Pinterest, just scrolling through, just looking at lots and lots of different types of artwork. So not just miniatures, but just artwork in general, and people creating all different types of characters and seeing what they do and seeing what I think looks really cool in terms of their character designs and the colors that they've chosen, and whether to go like really muted with the colors, like only having what seems like, only a few colors, like with the bust was mostly all just, browns, or going really hyper rainbow. That's kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum for both of these that I did for you guys. And I don't know how I get to those specific decisions. I seem to be lucky with the fact that I have a lot of ideas. And I mean, I have so many ideas, I don't think I'm going to get them all done within the rest of my life. It really is just like, you can just look through something and think, oh, that looks kind of cool. I wonder how, like, if I took a bit of that and that and that and then put it in with this model, whether that would come out cool. And then that becomes the experiment, and whether it turns out well or not is up to the viewer, I guess. But sometimes I feel it doesn't. Like, I'm pretty strict on my own work, and I feel like I can internally know when I haven't done my best work, even though it can be pretty good. It's just not living up to what I felt like the idea had potential for. So then I might visit that idea again in the future, mix it up a little bit, that sort of thing. And I don't know if you want me to be talking about a certain anime that sort of inspired me quite a bit for both.
Well, yes, so I was just about to come onto that. I think it's very interesting. I know on classes, very often we will say to people, don't use another person's painted miniature should very rarely be your first port of call when you're referencing something. We're always sort of saying, try and find real life photographs or the thing in real life. But I suppose that's slightly more when it's focused towards, we talk about volumes or how light behaves on something. What I found interesting you saying there, and it's something Andy mentioned a little while ago, he'd got another coffee table art book and was just flicking through it and saying how he was looking through it, just as you said there, for color scheme ideas, basically. So using 2D artwork, not necessarily from a stylistic point of view of the brushstroke or anything like that, but simply from I wonder what this palette would look like. Well, hang on, there's probably been 1,000 excellent artists that have tried that on something. Pinterest, I think that's a really good tip, actually. I think sometimes I can get a bit stuck in Instagram, but if you really want to go off on a random linked image search. You can get some.
Yeah, that's it. Because they seem to just, I don't know, it just goes all over the place with artwork on Pinterest, which is really cool. So I don't know how their algorithms work, but I find that they have the best, like Google image search, if you want specifics, is really good. But if you want to go really broad and open, then Pinterest is good. And I've been pinning a lot of stuff for a long time, and so I feel like I've got a pretty good collection of references there now. So if I'm ever struggling for an idea, I can pretty quickly go in there and find something that'll just inspire me to think, oh wow, that'll work on that model, and boom, and away the idea runs once that happens. So I think that's a really important thing for people to think about doing. Like, even if they're just bored or not in the mood to paint, but they are really serious about wanting to improve their painting. If they're just watching TV, but they're not really paying that much attention, they have their phone or laptop or a tablet device, they can just flip through and just don't even have to be really looking that much. But if you see something you like, just pin it away or save it somewhere, and then you can come back and see it later and keep those creative juices flowing, I guess.
Yeah, man, that's great tips. Let's have a quick look in the chat. So we've got Fohammer, who is painting the warrior at the moment. Go check him out. And he has used a piece of 2D artwork for exactly what we're talking about. Finding some cool colors. He's found an old bit of samurai artwork, and it's got these cool turquoise and jade colors in there. He was saying video game art books are always really, really good fun for references. Mike is going to very nicely segue us onto what you were about to talk about, Dave. Where did the idea for the base come from, Dave? Having him walking on water is pretty out there. It's cool as hell, but it is pretty out there. So,
yep. So that one's straight from Mononoke. I initially drew a lot of reference from, or straight towards the forest spirit character from the movie. So the woodsman, I feel like that he's like a personification of a forest spirit or a guardian of the forest kind of guy. He's a wood elf, like Orion, the king of the elves. Those sorts of things, they all come together in him in a really cool way. And I don't know how I thought about it, but it just, when Andy showed me the model with the vine behind his foot and just having the foot 1 foot forward like that, I just thought, hang on, that's going to be possible, I think, to make a resin base and have him stepping out on the water. And that's pretty much what happened. And I don't do a lot of nature bases, and I just thought, oh geez, I've been playing with resin a lot lately, and I want to give this a try, and hopefully it will work.
Yeah, I mean, it's stunning, the base. I think it's really caught people's imagination, and again, it's not something me and Andy had ever spoken about. I know Andy's a massive Princess Mononoke fan, but yes, this idea of the woodsman being a forest spirit, like you say, being able to walk on the water, and then you don't just do him walking over a little bit of water. You do this incredible base,
deep.
Yeah, you might as well go all in, right? Like,
I don't even know what, like, usually I do a square base. I don't even know what made me go rectangular, but I felt like if it didn't have that extra bit stretching out in front to really let it be deep, it wouldn't quite give the effect that I was going for. So it was all risky, because I've never done anything like this before. And there are some issues with the resin, I feel like, with bubbles, and a lot of people have told me they just make it seem like there's little.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like a dirty pond, river bubbles.
Yeah,
every single one of those is deliberate, surely.
Yeah, that's it. And so, like, I've been thinking about and working on this space for a long time, and nature bases, studying a lot of other painters and modelers, and I think the only ones that really work are the ones that have like a huge amount of variation in the foliage. So you've got to have lots and lots of different leaves, lots and lots of different grasses, or as much as you possibly can, and it needs to be just like chaotic and mixed about. And I've tried to do that as much as I can here. And I had this idea, if it's going to be suspended in resin, why can't I just use like real plants? So under the water, there's actually quite a few just bits and pieces that I pulled off of plants while I was walking or running. I just stopped and like, oh, that's going to go well. I'll come back and grab that when I'm about to do the pour, so I can put some paint on it and then stick it in, because it's not gonna rot once it's suspended in resin, is it? So
we hope, because you can't take it out.
yeah, that's right. Well, I think
you should, right? Because there's no oxygen.
It's just encased in plastic. It's hand solo and carbonite now.
Yeah. I saw I think the thing that triggered me to think of that is I saw a four-leaf clover a long time ago suspended in a little block of resin, and I assume that means it will be able to survive forever. So I think so far it looks
enough for the box art, mate. So it's all
it's fine.
Yeah, and so nothing above the resin level is real nature. That's all plastic, and the other stuff that I've got lying around for nature bases, but. Yeah, nature bases aren't necessarily my thing, but it was good to have the chance and opportunity to see whether I could do it in a convincing way or not.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very cool. And I think what's nice as well is it's a busy base, right? Like you said, but by very deliberately, you've got a lot going on under the surface. Yet your eye is still not drawn from the model. Which I think's a pretty big achievement, really.
Yeah, well, that's a big part of my focus in painting at the moment, is trying to ensure that I'm drawing the focus to the head, and I have this perception or idea that if he wasn't as brightly yellow as he is in this particular scene, it may not have worked as well, because it really needed that. It really needed that crazy over the top yellow to keep you away from the base. And so that's what I was going for, and I think it's worked quite well on this guy. And the yellow again, it's like him being a forest spirit. I wanted him to have kind of like this feeling of an inner glow, like he's producing light a little bit himself, like he's magical. If that makes sense.
No, that's why I said it has this ethereal kind of glow to him. And I think what I've discovered when looking at art is, say you have something like a glowing sword. On a 2D piece of art, they actually obviously paint an aura around that sword.
Around it, yep.
And we can't do that in a model unless we put some fuzz on it or something. So
and that just looks off.
Yeah, so actually it's one of the things that's more challenging with a miniature. And like I said earlier, and you brought it up, he really does have this aura, and it serves two purposes, because it does draw your eyes to where we want it to, the face and everything like that, but it also sells the story, and it does make him feel ethereal, or that there's some sunlight glowing on him in this forest, and it just balanced everything so well. So it's really very, very cool.
Yeah, thanks. I had this. Do you know about dappled light? Where the light coming through the trees. I had the idea of maybe trying that on this model, I didn't end up doing it because I'm not confident that I can pull it off. And for a box art, I didn't really want to mess it up, because that is got to be one of the hardest things to do. I've tried it once before, and I have an intention to try it again at some point. But I feel like just the way that he's been painted has given the idea of something like that. So it's more like a god ray coming down from above, rather than dappled light. So maybe if I ever get the bust, I'll try it on the bust version.
Well, yeah, there'll be one sent your way, I'm sure. I really like that angle, actually, Henry, you had, because that you really see that angle is cool, because you can see all the detail in the water, but it does really feel glowing there, because you can see the back of the leg, the back of the arm, and it does feel that light on the front. So it works from all angles, this piece. It
does, and it's great to show off what you were saying about just quite how big that base is as well. But it does, it makes sense. You everything you're talking about, these inspirations that you've talked about, which was exactly what I was hoping for, if I'm honest, now that you've explained them, I do think they're very obvious. I do think, you've managed to communicate that in the piece. And this idea of, you can sort of picture it in a piece of artwork or a movie or something where, great big dark forest and all the rest of it, little god spot comes through, illuminates the lake or whatever, and there's this scary looking, deer looking dude just walking out across the water towards you. I think it's got that lovely fey aspect and quite scary too, which is what you want. This idea of this quite sinister. I think elves very often are you perhaps don't get that sinister. It almost always goes straight to the dark elf trope of just sort of really nasty perverts, rather than sort of looking at that slightly more sinister angle that they've got going. Even the theoretically good ones. He's got a lot of nice vibe to him.
Yeah, well, elves have got that duality of nature, don't they? They've got the strong emotions, and I've always thought of the wood elves being the ones trying to be in balance between the two. Then you've got like your high elves and your dark elves, and I'm really glad to hear that the stories and ideas that I've done and tried to portray with my painting is coming across so clearly. So.
It's really cool, man. And I think you just saying then about the high elves, the dark elves, and the wood elves is highlights again what one of the things we're trying to do with this release and with the elves of Deorgard as a whole range of what's coming up in the future as well is to give us an opportunity to explore outside those three very established tropes for the elves. And we're starting to see that with a few of the models in this first set of releases, and I can't wait to see people like yourself, artists like yourself, have that opportunity to without sounding too grandiose or whatever about it, but to progress that. We're all fans of fantasy and sci-fi, and I think our art forms are changing, aren't they? Instagram has had a massive effect now on how people can consume artwork. And for a long time, I think miniatures painting wasn't necessarily considered alongside traditional art forms. But I'm hoping it's becoming more and more considered that way. And it's certainly something we're trying to drive and support as well. So I think going into the future, wouldn't it be lovely to have a genuine impact on fantasy art via miniatures, not just 2D artwork?
Well, that's something I can definitely get behind. I'm all for growing this into a bigger and more widely accepted form of artwork. I feel like because it's grown from tabletop painting, it still has that kind of stigma of it being toys or figurines, whereas it's really not those kind of things these days. It is artwork. It's the kind of artwork that sits on your shelf, and that's there to look at. And it's sometimes, I think, people who may have only seen miniatures on the internet and haven't had a chance to see them in person don't, or may not really grasp just what it is about a miniature that makes it so cool. Like, at least in my mind anyway, I love the way that so many painters and sculptors and creators are putting so much detail into something so small. It just, something about that makes it come alive a lot more to me. So I really hope it will continue to grow.
Definitely, it's atmosphere as well, though, isn't it? Because we're with computer-aided design, not just computer-aided design for sculpting, but with a lot of 2D artwork now being done digitally. The volume of stuff we're getting to see now is huge and pretty rapid, but it's always so, to me anyway, it's always so obvious when an artist or a sculptor or a miniatures artist gets it right, because there's a ton of atmosphere all of a sudden to a piece. I think digitally produced things can very often be a little soulless. Can be a little formulaic, but it's when you see that atmosphere, and I think when you get those models that suggest that, and then you combine it with an artist who is able to produce what they've got in their mind, which I think a lot of us that are the miniatures painters are trying to do, right? Is we've got these ideas in here, and we've chosen miniatures as to be how we can express those weird, fantastical or sci-fi. Sci-fi ideas, and it's lovely when you see someone able to communicate that. So yeah, it's nice, and I think I was really hoping this would be an interesting interview, not just so people enjoy watching it, but from a purely selfish point of view. to just it's, I talk to Andy an awful lot about painting. Obviously, it's our jobs, but it is really nice to talk to someone who has chosen to make it such an enormous part of their life. It's really interesting to sort of hear your thoughts on approaching it as an art form, not just as a pastime. So that's cool. Let's have a quick look in the chat and see what's going. Most important question, David, what's your thoughts on dwarves? About elves plenty here. Chris very keen for the 2023 release, or whatever it's going to be, Deorgard release.
Actually, I don't think I've ever painted a dwarf.
There we go.
And that's it. No, that's not against dwarves. I have a few models. I just haven't gotten to them yet, which is really interesting to me. I like dwarves, and plan to. I think actually in one of the next 3 or 4 that I paint will be a dwarf, I think, depending on how time goes. Stuff always seems to get mixed around, but that's the current plan. I think that there's a certain type of dwarf model that I like.
Raoul's one.
And and Spira's, Lucas Pina. Got to love his stuff, and I think that dwarfs have just as much complex emotion within the variety of choices in them as well as elves.
Yes. See, I told you, Andy, we're definitely doing them.
I feel like there's really a lot of potential. Like there aren't a lot of chaos dwarfs, or not chaos dwarfs, but like outside the normal realm of like, you've got a dwarf and he's a dwarf. You can get some like really interesting ideas to mix things like that. Like I think there is potential for stuff like that. Like, what about dwarves? This is just what pops into my head, but what about like dwarves riding birds, or
I'm in.
Some, that's just
no, but it is true. I feel like Tolkien has had an enormous impact on fantasy, or Western fantasy certainly, and I think no more so than with dwarves. You know, there's very, very few takes on dwarves now that aren't essentially just Tolkien dwarves. I mean, I think I'm right in saying if you go back to the Norse mythology, I feel like were dwarves like the bad elves or something? Trying to remember, like what dark elves effectively were dwarves. I'm sure they were much more sinister in that mythology.
Yeah, the only way I have of referencing that is the God of War game, and I think the dwarves were just the builders in that. So, and that's based on Norse mythology. But I don't know. I really don't know. But I think that they may have something to do with that.
There's a ton of stuff to explore. I mean, we said this in the last stream. The success of this campaign has given us that confidence and that further ambition to populate this setting. And you know, once the elves are out the way, once we've done all the elves that we think we want to do, we're definitely looking forward to exploring some of those other classic fantasy races. Here was someone, Stefan, saying in the sagas they're treated as antagonistic as other races. Yeah, I'm gonna have a look into it. Who knows? Maybe we'll see it when we look at some dwarves.
We'll try and persuade me.
Draw something from there. Dave, Mike's asked, and this is always a question we have on classes from people: is how long from start to finish did it take you to paint this mini?
I can only guess. It's probably, I think, about 10 to 12 days with varying amounts of time each day. So if in the 50-hour range, I think that's about normal for me for a display model, about 50.
Cool.
It depends on how much skin and non-metallic metal there is. Like if there's a lot of skin, usually it takes a lot of time. And this guy did have a lot of skin, but it did come together quite quickly for him. So yeah, I think probably 40 to 50 is probably a fair guess.
Are you happy to, if we answer a few more questions out the comments, Dave, or were there other aspects you wanted to talk about a bit further before we dive into comments?
To go with comments. That's
so. Yeah. Here's very nicely segued from your NMM comment just then. Josh asks, when painting a model at this scale, are there advantages to NMM or non-metallic metal over TMMs, a true metallic metal? And vice versa, are there disadvantages?
Well, this is only going to be my personal opinion on this, because there are true metallic metal painters that are magnificent at painting with that medium, and I'm not real good at it. I made a decision about maybe a year and a half ago now to switch from true metallics to non-metallics almost exclusively. I don't know exactly what made me make that decision. I've maybe feel like that I just always didn't go to non-metallic metals because they were just too hard. And then I realized that I was thinking that way, and I'm like, well, I'm here to challenge myself. I want to get better, so I'm going to have to dive into non-metallic metals. It just means I'm going to be crap at it for a little while. And realistically, there are benefits and downsides to using either in any case. At the smaller scales, I think some non-metallic metal, it is easier to make it have that metal feel if you get it right. And at the larger scales, it can also appear as metal to the viewer if it's done right, but it's a lot more difficult to do it. There are sometimes, like if this model had a little bit less metallic elements in it, so say it was just a few buckles or a couple of only tiny little bits and pieces where you just want to get the shine on, I may still choose to use metallics for something like that, because doing them with non-metallic metal just ends up looking flat or grey if it's just small buckles or just tiny little bits and pieces there. I haven't done that for a while, but yeah, most of the time I'll choose non-metallics because it's a challenge, and I want to keep improving on it. And I think that there's more versatility in it for miniatures than with true metallics, but that's coming from me as a non-metallic metal painter. So I'm sure that there are people who can do a better job using true metallics to their full potential, but it seems to be quite a divisive subject, though, sometimes, I think.
Yeah, I love it. That's why we should talk about it lots.
We should do a whole show on that sometime.
So let's, yeah, we definitely will. But I think, Andy, I think I wouldn't mind hearing just your maybe quick thoughts on that as well, particularly with regards to this sort of scale, so larger than tabletop scale.
Yeah. So why choose non-metallics?
Yeah. What do you perceive as the advantage of them at this scale?
I think it's all about control. So with non-metallics, you are drawing everything. So you're picking every tone in every place, and you're choosing where you want attention and where you want reflection. And you can do that with true metallics, but you're also, at the mercy of the real reflections they're giving. So one of the things I hear people say they don't like about non-metallics, in my opinion, they're interpreting it wrong, is they say it only looks good at one angle or something like that. But, with true metallics, then it's mismatching with your angle. So if you're painting highlights in a certain way on a miniature, then the true metallics can play opposite that if the light's not facing the right way. And I think for me, it's all about control. And when you're painting in a style like this, for example, with Dave's piece, he's choosing all the focus to go on the torso. And if he had a true metallic paint, he would lose some of that control where the focus is, because say he had true metallics on the sword next to the face of the figure, that could actually draw attention away because it's a naturally shiny product, right? Whereas he can choose exactly how much to desaturate the yellows he has to use in the gold on the sword. So yeah, I guess for me, I agree with Dave. The challenge is really important, and I love the room to explore within non-metallic metal. You can just do everything, and people every few years, someone does non-metallic metal a bit better. Like Kirill's just comes out with something, and he ups the game on that. And I haven't seen those leaps with true metallics. So yeah, but I guess control and the challenge, if I was going to summarize. But definitely the most important thing for me is you can draw them how you want. And when you're painting in an illustrative style, then your metallics need to match that. So we could do a 2-hour show on this.
No, I think we will, particularly that last point you mentioned. But yeah, we'll come on to that on a different time. Dave, one thing I wanted to ask you, we've been rather passionate, whatever the word you want to use, about this 54mm scale.
Yep.
You've painted a real wide variety of models, which, if we look back through your Instagram as well, at a fairly remarkable rate as well. Busts, 75mm, tabletop sort of 28, 32mm stuff. How do you find the 54mm scale sits?
I love all scales. I think that there is room for choice within a lot of different scales when you can print from a digital source. I think for these guys, it's perfect. I like small as well. I like small a lot, and I think 54 is like almost right on that perfect balance point between small and large, because it gets that real true miniature look and feel when you see it in person. When you go larger, they can give more visibility and detail, and I do love that in busts, which is why I paint so many of them. But I love having the choice of going either way, like big on the bust or smaller on the figure to 54. And then I don't know if there's a lot of room for me going down to like 32 millimeter or in any of that sort of stuff anymore. I feel like that's just getting a little bit small, and the details end up getting a little bit lost, and you just don't have as much. You don't have as much room to maneuver or use your creativity. I mean, there are circumstances where that is of benefit, like big diorama scenes probably do better with smaller models. You know, like lots of smaller models fit with dioramas or vignettes. Whereas when you're doing a character focus like this, I think 54 is probably the spot on size. There are some other characters I think that can do well bigger, depends, but most of the time 54 is my favorite scale in terms of single character focus. 54 to 75, I mean, it's hard to tell the difference.
It is sometimes, isn't it? Definitely. I think one of the ways I've heard it described, it was probably Andy who described it this way, was the idea of it just allows a little bit more room for the artist to express themselves. It's that tiny bit larger. So as you say, all of a sudden we could look at 10 different Woodsman models and they would be very, very different, as opposed to say 10 different Marines, which would be different, but perhaps in a, not such a wide way. Fohammer just commenting that 54mm is his new favorite scale. That's excellent.
That's on purpose.
That's the whole reason for these projects.
Yeah, and I think we can all agree that Games Workshop is sort of creeping up towards that as well. Like they're officially 35mm, but they're 40 or 45 or even 50 in reality now, and that's a good thing, I think.
Definitely.
I think we're really passionate about being inclusive and getting people to enjoy lots of miniatures, and my experience has been there's often not in a negative way, but you get large scale painters, Games Workshop painters, and one of the reasons we stuck to our guns to do 54, because there's a lot of people going, why not 75, is we want it to be approachable, so you get someone who can get a Primaris and isn't too scared to jump to this. So that's just something we really care about, I guess.
I mean, we might have a treat in store for 75mm fans, but we'll have to see.
And there's also the potential for it to be used as a proxy in some cases. Like this guy would make a great Orion model.
I know, we totally didn't cross our minds that at all. Quite a few people have said that would be
Should we talk about the bust? I think would be cool.
I would love to talk about that. I think, if I'm honest, mate, we're already well over that hour mark. I would love to have Dave on to talk a whole episode, just talk about bust painting, and I think particularly with her being so different, which you touched on very early, with your approach to her being so different to how you've done the Woodsman. If that's cool with you. One of the questions we do need to answer quickly though is who is your favourite Australian painter and why is it Trent Dennison? And that's from Trent Dennison.
Yeah, well, actually, my answer is Trent. He's up there. He's one of my favourites. I find it difficult to pick individual, one-time favourites, because like I like the way a lot of a lot of people are doing their work these days. I like what Kara's doing. I like what Sebastian's doing. I like what Mike Ingram's doing. It's between all of those, and being able to choose is impossible. Like, I really just enjoy looking at other people's work in miniatures. That's probably one of my favorite things about this whole thing, is seeing other people's interpretations and ideas, and especially when they're completely different to stuff that I've had. I love that sort of stuff, and I think we've got a lot of original guys and girls here doing some really interesting stuff. Mark and Meg as well, like they do when they're doing painting. They haven't been outputting a lot lately, but they have been doing awesome work as well. So yeah, that's my answer to that, Trent. Thanks very much.
Trent's the fastest though, and that's the most important thing, right?
Well, that's you're saying
he's the fastest in the world,
and you said out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty damn impressive. Like yourself and Trent, like that your output rate. It's it's pretty full on. It's very impressed. I did want to ask you, Dave, before we wrap up, is I think it's fair to say your development or your output or whatever has really skyrocketed over the last sort of 18 months to maybe 2 years, but I think 18 months. Has there been anything within that time frame that you can attribute that to, or do you think it's simply a matter of you've now got X hours under your belt and a vision of where you want to go with it?
I think I can attribute a lot of my improvements to the classes that I've had. So in that period, I had a class with Carhart, Roman Gruber, Mark Masklins, and Craft World, and so I can pretty much lay the improvement all at their feet. Like after every single one of those classes, I had big jumps, and after every single one of those classes, they've helped me to understand the things that I didn't understand from the previous classes. And I feel extremely lucky to have had the chance to learn from those awesome painters. And that's pretty much what I would lay it at. And having the family that I do who support me so much and allow me to just, sit and paint as much as I do. It's pretty much what I've devoted my life to. I don't do anything else. So whether you want to put any of that towards it at all, but I'm very lucky to be able to live the way I do with my family, and the amount of expenses I have are quite low because of that. So I can focus on painting. So I couldn't do it without them. I really have to thank them for their support. I can't say it without saying that.
That's nice to hear as well. That definitely. I think I just wanted to ask it really because, we're still a young company, and I feel like it's a very exciting time at the moment within the miniatures producing community. And one of the things we really wanted to do with this project was to, whilst there were a couple of very, very established, sort of painters, well-known painters that we wanted to try and grab for box art. There's so many great painters in this sort of next wave or next generation, whatever you want to call it. And it just felt like a very nice project to try and grab lots and lots of those, and start to get that whole community coming through sort of together. But yeah, I think when we met you a few years ago, when we were hosting Mark Masklands for a masterclass out in Melbourne, where you were on that one. I remember coming over at the end of the day. I'd been teaching a different class, and I came over to sort of see how's it all going on Mark's table. And I can remember sort of someone saying, "Oh yeah, you seen what this Dave guy is painting like? You know, it's like, and it was like, oh yes, that's significantly better than a lot of stuff I've ever seen, sort of thing. So I think straight away then there was this. That was very exciting to go, oh, hello, you know, who's this person? You know, who's this next one to watch type thing? And you know, and this isn't just to blow smoke up your ass or the rest of it, but it has been really cool to, you know, I don't compete, I don't go to painting competition and whatnot, but I do follow the scene, and it's been really fun to see your ascendancy within it, and I do think a huge amount of that is that not just the quality of the output, but the amount. You know, there's always something good coming from you every couple of weeks. It's not a once a year type project.
Thanks. So, I'm glad to hear it. I think I work pretty hard. So it's good to know that people like to see stuff. I sometimes feel like I don't want to post too much because I don't want to spam people's feeds. So it's good to know people like to see what I'm posting.
That's all right. That's why you gotta love Instagram, right? You can't really spam Instagram, can you? So
yeah, I guess not.
You always pick and choose. That's awesome. So let's see, just check if we've got any other questions before we wrap this up. This is a good one from Andrew. Do you use sub-assemblies for a project like this, or do you prefer to have the figure as fully assembled as possible?
Okay, this will all depend on the model. If I can have a sub-assembly and it won't affect the end result, then I'll try and break it into less pieces. But sometimes they're having something assembled is going to stop your ability to reach an area that might be key to getting the finished result. And it's important to think about those things when you're doing assembly. And so, I hate trying to do a good job painting on something when you just can't reach it. So a sub-assembly is important for that. And I do use sub-assemblies a lot more for the smaller scale stuff. The Woodsman, I didn't use any sub-assemblies. He was fully assembled. And he's fairly well laid out for that. So there wasn't any difficult, hard to reach places on him. And that's always a good thing. But some dynamic models, they really need to be done in parts, but it's very, very important for the creators of models to think about where they're being attached, because if you've got an attachment point that requires you to gap fill and it's going to be very visible, you don't want to be painting and then gap filling after painting and then painting over the gap filling, because it's never quite as perfect as when you do it beforehand and really take your time with it. You don't have to paint over the little bits of mistakes. So from my perspective as a painter, I always want to tell manufacturers to please consider the attachment points very carefully.
No, that's a great point, and as something I've mentioned in one of the earlier streams is Andy was. It was fantastic to have Andy's experience in these larger scale miniatures, particularly when it came to that side of things, when the figures were sculpted, to look at those attachments. And again, the sculptors we worked with were very cognizant of it as well. But there was more than one revision made for exactly that reason. And as you say, the more dynamic the model, often the more challenging that can be. But that was also something that was considered very early on in the design process as well, was as cool as some poses might look in 2D artwork, they may not actually be that fun or even physically possible to paint.
Or even create to paint.
Yeah.
Like, casting is an art form all on its own these days, I think. And that's an important thing to think about, because if it can't be casted and if the only way it can be casted is to leave a big mold line or something through texture or something like that. If you're going to have texture in a position where a mold line can be generated, that's something really important to think about as well, because I can't think of anything more that will ruin my creativity and feeling of joy on a model than coming across a mold line going through texture printed into the model. That's just the worst thing ever. And sometimes I've put models aside and never come back to them because of it.
Totally, yeah, totally.
Yeah, the sculpted texture is, of course, something that you were able to explore a bit more at these larger scales as well, and particularly with the computer-aided design, I think.
Yeah.
And it's something we've looked at a lot on this range. I chucked a photo up the other night from Andy had been painting the Archer on the live stream, and he'd been working through the base coats and a little bit of highlighting, and we popped up a close-up just to show the texture in some of the leather on the back of her. There was some quite amusing comments. There's quite a lot of people that were praising your paint job on that, Andy, and saying what an incredible paint job you'd done to represent all of that change. We then quickly informed that no, that was simply one thin coat of brown over the sculpted texture. But you know, you've got to love
don't correct them, Henry.
You got to love Instagram. I suppose so. I'm going to address this question, but we'll make sure we end it on a very positive note. We talked earlier about miniature painting as a 3D art form as opposed to 2D artwork. And this is Raman Ron asking, do you think painting with a specific camera angle in mind is disingenuous?
Ooh.
So that's quite an interesting question, really.
That's an amazing question.
We talked about it, didn't we, Dave?
Yeah. This is something that I've talked about with a few people, and I think about a lot. And I'm not going to say that I think that it's disingenuous, because there are purposes for everything. It depends on what the paint job is for, and more, especially at the moment, the only way that we can interact with people is on the internet. And so if people can only see something in pictures, I don't think that there is anything wrong in painting to get the best result for your pictures, especially for a box art. From my perspective, a box art comes down to having that one perfect shot that's going to be put onto the box, and so it's in my mind the whole time that I'm painting. I want that one perfect shot, but as a painter, a big part of my philosophy is trying to achieve an appealing look, no matter where you look at it from the model, even on the box art models. And this is perhaps more specific to the bust, because it does have the potentially downside angle. But the woodsman is more of an all-rounder. He's got color everywhere. He doesn't have any really bad angles. I think even within the sculpt, he doesn't really have any bad angles. Like, I mean, most models don't look great from side on. When you look at them exactly side on, that's just their off angles. And I mean, no matter how you paint it from side on, you're never going to make it look awesome, because it just doesn't, it's just side on. I like to share pictures of my models from all angles, even if it's the non-flattering ones. And
that's great.
I know that some artists don't do that, but I mean, it is a 3D art form to me, and I like to allow people to be able to see it from every angle, even though it's maybe not going to look as good. And I mean, sometimes I see some photos from some bad angles, and I just think, oh God, I really don't like that one. But in the end, that's part of what I've created, and I do believe that painting for the focus and painting for the main view in the front, as long as it can be like rotated probably a 60 degrees, maybe even 90 to 180 degrees, as long as you can get it looking pretty much good from the front. I think you're all good then. So the back is the back, and sometimes I just want to just say, I don't want to paint the back. I don't care about the back. It's going to sit on a shelf. No one can see the back. Why should I bother putting my time into making this look awesome? So usually I don't put as much effort into that. And a lot of the lighting choices I've made lately have that as a major aspect of it. You know, the light is focused on the front and not the back. So yeah, I don't think it's disingenuous. Definitely not disingenuous. In fact, I think it's fine for people to choose to do it that way. It's just all about what priorities and what purpose the person who's creating that has in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Purpose is the most important thing, isn't it? And I think you vary it, because sometimes you want to do a piece that has a very specific light situation, and it's like you were saying, all these creative ideas you have, and sometimes you're going to see a reference which has some really specific, light direction or situation, and unless you go all in on that, have dark,
you can't get it.
It doesn't work. And I think the most important thing is we make choices and we vary it, because I've done pieces that are one angle and no other angle matters at all, but I've chosen that path, and you're open about it. Like, this is a one angle piece, front on, and then sometimes you do stuff to look good in the 360, and I think you just vary it, right, and make the choice and explain to people, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. So I wouldn't say that there's a negative side to it. It just depends on what the artist was trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's spot on. I think it'd be fun to pick that up, guys, when we do the bust chat. Because as you say, you very that one perhaps has a very direct sort of link to this question, right?
Yeah, it does. It does indeed.
So that was very, very, very nicely answered. You two should try politics. It's been very good. Andy, was there anything else you wanted to sort of ask Dave on this chat?
I don't know. I think if we're going to do something about busts again sometime, then save all the juicy questions.
Yeah, man. I'd love to have Dave on again to get his thoughts on that, and I'd love to, I think, sort of wind you two up and let you go with regards to talking about the bust painting. It's definitely something that I perhaps had lumped in with basically non-tabletop painting. Oh, it's busts and large scale and this, that, and the other. But the more I see of them and have had a go at a few now, I think it is its own little category. It's its own category. And I think I would really like to hear your guys' thoughts on those, and particularly with us focusing on a variety of busts for this Kickstarter. We recently unlocked the academic bust version of the Woodsman, where you've just sort of got his head and his chest rather than arms, weapons, antlers, all the branches and whatnot. So I think it'd be fun to get your two thoughts, and maybe we'll bring someone else on as well to have a talk about those. There's a lot of calls for spam in the chat, Dave. So I don't think you have anything to worry about.
Yeah, more.
People are asking for more spam. So
okay.
That's always a good thing, right? So yeah, I think I'd like to wrap this one up here. We're on an hour and a half. I think we'll try and keep these chats around there. So thanks very much, guys in the chat, for joining us and asking some really excellent questions. And a huge thanks to you, Dave. That was a super interesting to listen to you talk about a lot of those things to do with not just painting our models, but painting in general. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I definitely did. I'm down for more. I get a lot out of discussions like this, like hearing Andy talk about his non-metallic metals and him basically just putting into words the thoughts in my head that I can't vocalize. That was awesome. So yeah, if you want me on again, I'm down. Just let me know when.
Definitely. And is there anything you wanting to pimp at all? I know I'll make sure I pop all your social media links and whatnot in the descriptions. Something I've tried to do on the Kickstarter page actually is all the box art and all the renders and stuff. If you click on them, you will go through to that artist or that sculptor's social media pages as well. So I think it's a good way to introduce or to introduce people to those artists. So was there anything any way you particularly want to signpost people?
Not really. The only thing that really comes to mind is that I've just done my first stream on the weekend, and I quite enjoyed that.
I was sad you missed it, and I saw you were sad you didn't sort of post it. So
I've got to do again so that it'll save it afterwards next time. So I was thinking I might see about jumping on stream today after the session.
And that's over on is that your Twitch channel?
Yeah, I'll put it on Twitch and my YouTube and probably Facebook. If I can get it to go to all three at once, that's what I'll try and do. So don't worry about posting links or whatever. That's fine. People can find their way there if they want to.
They'll get there. Don't worry.
We offered.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thanks very much, Bud. And
thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for being on as well, Andy. It's always feel a bit intimidated when we get proper artists on, so it's nice to have you there to give it a bit of weight to the interview. But yeah, we're still loving what's going on with this campaign. We just ticked over another milestone, which is awesome. We've got a bunch more stretch goals lined up, and as I said earlier, we've got our secondary box arts coming out from this week onwards, which is going to be very, very cool to see. We've got some really cool alternative box art's a better word, isn't it? Got some alternative box arts to show you, showing off some of those parts we've managed to unlock as well. So thanks everybody for listening. Check out the YouTube, check out the Patreon if you want to see more tutorials. And if you haven't checked out the Kickstarter, I've no idea how you're here, to be honest. But go and check it out if you haven't. We're gonna keep putting lots of energy into that for the next couple of weeks. So we will see you all as soon as we've got the next couple of streams locked in with our guests. We will advertise on Facebook, on Instagram, and whatnot. Give you guys as much notice as we possibly can. But yeah, thanks again, Dave, and thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. That was great.
Awesome. And thanks to all you